We're good. Well, folks, welcome to this Agile20Reflect Festival event. We're here today to talk about ethics, so thanks for joining us. Got a really good session planned for you all. I think it's going to be a great debate. I'm really looking forward to exploring the topic. Just a few formalities before we start. I'm Sathpal. I'm your host for this event. Everybody calls me Sath, and I'm joined by my wonderful co-host, Shelby Wilson. We're both trustees of the festival. So let me I've got a quick slide I'm just going to bring up, and we'll just walk through a couple of things, and then I will introduce our awesome panelists. Hopefully you can now see that. So yeah, I think you're familiar with seeing this slide now. So yeah, Agile20Reflect, global festival built by volunteers around the world, a truly collaborative global effort. We're getting pretty close to 800 events, which is pretty remarkable. So thanks to everyone for their immense contributions to helping make that happen. We're all really chuffed about it, and everybody looks like they're having a great time, and we're learning a lot. I certainly am. It was a tremendous couple of weeks. The hashtag is in the bottom left there for you. So if you like to tweet or share on LinkedIn or whatever, please do use the hashtag. And the website address is in the bottom right for you. There's plenty of content on the website, and you can continue to use the calendar to find out what's coming up over the remainder of the festival. Quick shout out to our supporting orgs as well at the top there. They've been great supporters of the festival throughout. And yep, it's a free festival. It's been built by volunteers. But should you wish to donate, there is an opportunity to do so via the website. So take a look at that. And we're all bound by the community policy that we've put together for this festival. Everybody's involved in the festival is adhering to the policy. And in short, all we simply ask is that you're respectful to one another. If you'd like to read the policy in more detail, you'll find it on the website. There's a link to it in the footer. And yet we're well in full swing now. We're well into week 3. It's been an amazing experience, thoroughly enjoying it. And as I say, there's the address again, should you wish to go and find out anything else about the festival on the website. So there's the formalities there. We are recording the session, as you know. Right, it's gives me great pleasure to introduce our panelists for this session. Delighted this evening to be joined by Shane Hastie, all the way from New Zealand. Shane is the Director of Community Development at IC Agile. He's a past Director of Agile Alliance, and probably usefully for us this evening, he's also the co-chair of the Agile Coaching Ethics Initiative, who are a group of volunteers working together to create a framework around ethics and the code of conduct. So that will certainly be one of the things we'll be exploring over the course of this session. We're also joined by Padmini Nidumolu. I'm gonna make a mess of your surname there, which is terrible for me given I'm of Indian origin. So Padmini could beat me up later for that.
You passed.
Did I pass? And Padmini is based out in Washington, and Padmini is the founder of Lean in Agile for Women, based out in DC. And also, interestingly, Padmini was instrumental in supporting us with the creation of the community policy for the festival. And I really enjoyed collaborating with her on that. So that's fantastic. And we're also joined by Daniel Mezick. Daniel's got many years of experience in the industry. He's an author, a consultant, a trader, written a number of books. He is the originator, I think is probably the right word, of the Open Space Agility, and also the founder of the Open Leadership Network. So fantastic to have Daniel joining us. And Daniel's also done a lot of work in sharing his thoughts and insights around the state of ethics within the Agile community. So really delighted to have him as part of this panel this evening. And last but not least, my great friend, Scott Seivwright, a coach, someone I've known for some years, and obviously goes without saying, Scott is the founder of Agile20Reflect Festival, and I've enjoyed collaborating with him, working to make this festival happen. And Scott is also very passionate about the subject of ethics, so I'm glad he's agreed to also sit in this panel and join this debate. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I was wondering if we should change it to finder rather than founder. Founder sounds very grand. I just found this.
You can call yourself whatever you want, but you prefer Chief Pirate normally.
Yeah, let's go with that.
That's it, Chief Pirate. You can call yourself whatever you like. And that's our panel. And I'm grateful to all of them for joining us, and really looking forward to hearing their thoughts. So just to start us off then, so before we get into it, it'd be great if everybody else could just switch their cameras off so we could just focus in on the panelists, if you wouldn't mind. This makes it a little bit easier for me as well. It's a nice small group, so that's really helpful. It's fantastic. Thank you for doing that. So I think just to get us started, I think it would be nice to perhaps do a bit of level setting here. So it'd be great to hear from all the panelists and get a little bit of their thoughts on a definition for ethics, perhaps hear them expressing ethics for themselves. So really good to start with that. Can I start with you, Shane? Could you give us, in your view, what does ethics mean to you?
The set of moral guidelines that you live your life by. And I think it's important you live your life by. It's not you have ethics at work and ethics at home or ethics in different contexts. There may be different ethical challenges, but fundamentally for me, it is that what is right and good?
I like that. What is right and good? That's nice and simple. That's fab. Daniel, can I come to you next?
Sure. Yeah, ethics. Pertains to philosophy. It's actually a branch of moral philosophy. That's the formal definition. I think probably the informal definition is something like, how do I do the most good for the most people today?
Yeah. Well, I like that. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one. Padmini, what are your thoughts?
Yes, I think it's not any different from what Shane and Daniel already mentioned. Ethics is, I think it's a system of moral principles, right? Something that governs the conduct of a person, very simply put. So I think it encompasses, as Shane said, it's both personal and corporate standards of behavior expected by professionals. As simple as that, right? There is no distinction between, I'm ethical here versus here. I think it is a common platform, a moral platform that a person stands on at all times, distinguishing between right and wrong.
Fantastic. Scott?
I think ethics is one of the things that binds us together as people. So we all decide to do something together, and for humans to do that, we need to find a way to cooperate. So I think the evolution of ethics came with the evolution of social society and humans, and if you look at a lot of the major religions, if you look at a lot of the kind of the human structures, ethics is fundamentally in there. I was going to do a funny answer. I was going to say ethics is a thing they don't teach in computer science school.
No, it certainly is not. No, I think they're all good, interesting views. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a kind of moral principles really around how we kind of govern, how we kind of conduct ourselves. Is kind of the way I like to look at it. But that feels a bit more formal than what you guys said, which is why I was quite keen to hear how you all expressed it. So can I just start? Quite keen to explore a little bit of the past and then a little bit of the present, and then think about where we go from here in the future, which is kind of what's brought us together. And Scott was quite keen that we do that. So what do we? So if we look at where we are now, what would we say currently is kind of like the real concern here? What do we think is going on? What's the concern, and what do we think is kind of the primary issue that we perhaps need to concern ourselves with? And probably related to that, what are we not really concerned about? So there's two parts to that. Can I start with you, Padmini, on this one?
Absolutely. I think the current concern in most situations, right, would be turn a blind eye kind of a culture, right? And also an attitude that business has always been done this way. right? I think it's that complacence and acceptance of what we think is okay. And I think that's where, I would say the weeds start and begin to grow. So as long as we don't change that or shift that culture of, we have been doing business this way, we don't know any other way, or we don't have the time to pivot, as long as we don't pivot that, it's going to be a challenge, right? Because it's going to be a compounding problem. It's going to be a cascading problem. So I think that's our current situation. And what we don't have, I think that was your next question, right, Seth? What is the concern and what we don't have right now is probably, I would say, a common buy-in. There is no common definition of what those ethics might be, and especially at what level. If you look at some of the code of ethics of the organizations that we operate in right now, right, including our community organizations, they're geared more towards, let's say, coaches or a particular role or a particular aspect of organization. But I don't think we have a holistic approach of what it really means to build that code of ethics. I think that's lacking right now, and it can be built only, it can be co-created by all of us. I don't think it can be done in silos or serving a very specific purpose. It has to be communal, it has to be co-created by all of us.
Absolutely. Daniel, would you like to build on that?
Yeah, and we're doing a 20-year anniversary of Agile. 6 years in, Martin Fowler had something to say about things he observed while drifting around the web in his essay, The Agile Imposition. And he discussed, some of the things I put in the chat here, quotes directly from him. So we only have an hour, so I mean, instead of giving an answer, I want to raise a question. What is the number one ethical concern facing our community and our industry today? It might not be my pet project. It might be something else. I don't want to actually provide an answer there. I'm raising the question. So that's what I wish to do, and I'm glad for the opportunity to do that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Tanya. Scott?
I think one of the things that I'm concerned about, and actually I picked up on it last night at an excellent event that Padmini organized. One of the speakers, Martha, was talking about almost like collective behavior, if I want to call it a better word,
Marcia Shank, it's ecosystem intelligence. Ecosystem intelligence, yeah.
Wonderful speaker. But she made a point, which was all this collectivism and working together is in the manifesto. So I went back to the manifesto and the principles today, and I couldn't really find it. Even the one that says, let's say it says people over process, actually says individuals over process. When I looked through
and interactions. Individuals and interactions.
Yeah. But so just I think I went into that one straight after coming out of the Agile 2 Cliff Berg's one, where Cliff was raising, something fell from my eyes yesterday when I started looking at it, and I realized that I realized a couple of things, that where we are just now, I don't think we've got a moral compass. Okay, so that moral compass is missing as a community. I think a lot of us see a lot of things in the manifesto, and the principles that aren't, and the values and principles that aren't actually there, but we teach it and talk about it all the time. I actually looked at a lot of things that I teach, and I don't see them there. Yeah, I do teach most things that are there, but there's a lot of other human stuff that's missing. So I think that's our biggest challenge. We seem to be taking something that's almost specific to a situation in time 20 years ago, and we've now trying to apply it to everything in the world. But it never was written with any kind of moral authority. So I worry about pivoting back to that for our stance. I think we need to rethink it. I think it is time for a re-innovation to think about just what the Agile values are. Yeah. When I entered this thing, I didn't think that that was true. I thought we could look at the Agile values and cram everything into it. But at this point in time, at this point here, I don't, and I think we're going to be wary as well about things that are ethical and things that are Agile values, and I think we confuse the two. And I've seen places where we're applying Agile values, right, unethically, just as if we were, Mao's Red Guard, breaking chair legs off, knocking the teachers down, and this implementing everything in the little red book. And the little red book hasn't changed since 20 years. There's something there that needs to evolve to take in all of the wonderful stuff that we teach in the community. It's just not there.
Yeah, because values, I think we were discussing before, I think values perhaps are as far as we often go, and we don't quite get as close as we need to get towards the ethical piece. Shane, what are your thoughts? Number one concern, and I think the question was more around what are we not concerned about? So I'll maybe give you the opportunity to cover those two off before we explore a little bit further, because quite a lot's already been said.
Yeah, I would say, if I could distill down my number one concern, and I'm quoting a friend of mine, James King, using Agile for evil. The imposition of often mechanistic ways of working imposed upon people and teams without their invite, and maybe it will improve something from an organization perspective, but fundamentally it's about free choice. And Dan's work on the open agility with the invitation is something that I've been inspired by since I first read about it, and then got to meet Dan. What am I not concerned about? I don't know. I think in the Agile space, one of the things is when we use Agile, what are we talking about? In my mind, it's a philosophy of collaborating that is inspired by the work of the 17 authors of the Agile Manifesto. But that was a point in time, and I agree with Scott. We're 20 years later. I wouldn't want to update the Agile Manifesto. That was an appropriate manifesto, an appropriate thing for the point in time that it was written by the people it was written by. If we do need to recraft something today, let's not call it an Agile Manifesto. I think that limits us. This is an inspiration for the future ways of working, because what I want to see is humanistic workplaces.
Yep.
It's not Agile practices in place. I'm inspired by the aspirations of teal organizations. How do we bring not just software development, but the whole world to being better?
So you just on that then, so just before I kind of open up a little bit more, when you say humanistic workplaces, what does that look like? In a utopian view of the world.
Yeah. Places where people can, there's hackneyed phrases, bring their whole selves to work, be motivated, be inspired, be themselves at work, be productive, be creative, in a sustainable way that is sustainable for society, sustainable for the organization, where we're building products that people love, that are profitable, but where profit is not the driving factor. The Lalou quote, where profit is the oxygen that we have to have in order to continue, but it's not what drives the behavior. It's that, and yeah, it's an aspiration where we see people doing good for each other. What is right and good.
Yeah. Profit is the oxygen. Yep. Like that. Okay, so if we build on that then a little bit, so we start thinking about some examples of the present and some behaviors, etc. So we touched on some of this in the session you did with Scott, roughly this time last week, actually. So a nice precursor to this, and thinking about some of the points that Daniel's been making and bringing up regarding kind of the dependency and that view around how we work with organizations, how we support them. Scott's made some points about values, talking about living by the values and the principles. How do we break that down a little bit? How do we deconstruct that? Padmini, can you start with that one?
Sure. To build on what Shane just mentioned, right? The human systems, because if an organization or a community is a living, breathing system, right? And when you're talking about human systems, I think one of the downside of creating these code of ethics in isolation, right, by a group of people, I think that's the fundamental gap in how it is adopted, how it is implemented, right? I think that's where we need to kind of look at, if you really look at the value and the fundamental principles of creating the code of ethics, I think we need to engage the employees or the community members to craft the code of ethics, right? Because if you engage them and if you co-create them, and make them understand why it is important to put these code of ethics into writing, into practice, and why it contains the tenets that it does. I think if you ask them to participate, the chances that they will participate and support and implement it wholeheartedly, the chances are just so much more, right? Because the code of conduct may itself encompass a well-rounded selection of principles. And most importantly, I think it's important to have a diverse group of people involved and having a seat at the table while crafting these code of conduct, right? Because we have to be culturally sensitive. The world is becoming smaller and smaller. And what is super ethical for one culture might not be or might not translate the same across the cultures. It's not necessarily wrong, right? It is just, it doesn't translate itself the same way across the cultures. So having that diverse group of people at the table is extremely important. So I think we have to start now, and now is the high time. I don't think we have a lot of time to do that, because I have personally seen how it has impacted a diverse group of people, right? So I think it's time we kind of take that on very seriously as a community.
You're a lot of what you're saying reminds me, takes me back to when we were having those similar conversations.
Yes.
We're putting together the community policy. We were talking about a lot of the same stuff. So that diversity of thought, that trying to span geographical barriers, but also cultural barriers, and create something that could be more universal.
Yeah.
What does that look like? Okay, fantastic. Scott?
You're muted.
You're on mute, mate.
Yeah, remind me of the question again. Remember, I got that.
So
I want. Sorry.
Yeah, that's all right. So we started to explore some of the kind of ideas around some of the challenges now, and obviously we talked a lot about the dependency piece, and obviously Daniel's done a lot of work in that space, and I wanted to give you guys the opportunity to explore that a little bit and deconstruct it. And Padmini touched on some of the challenges there around doing that, thinking about cultural boundaries and geographies and all the rest of it. And you as an Agile coach, someone practicing, an experienced coach, that some of the things that you're seeing and experiencing that perhaps don't sit well with you. You talked earlier about the moral compass. So do you want to expand on some of that a little bit?
Yeah, I think the biggest concern I've got is it's probably not a lot of the stuff that Shane and the Agile Alliance guys have been looking at, as in terms of individual behaviors. I think for me, it's more about organizational behaviors, and specifically agile transformations, or shall we call them so-called agile transformations? And typically large organizations will have some kind of political strategic in-house fight, perhaps come up with their internal definitions of what agility is, and then use fear. So remember, I'm a Deming guy. I started with lean, right? First thing Deming said in organizations is drive fear out. And all I see with agile transformations is fear, because we're shrinking the headcount. So people will shut up. They'll do whatever they do, and then we use the values as if it's a moral value, and the judgment that we use as agilists is terrible. So I've seen organizations, I'm not going to name them, but some of the first organizations in Scotland, to go agile, got some consultants in, and walked all the project managers and PMO out. This is a bank that's running tons and tons and tons and tons of money. Yeah. As soon as the project manager and the PMO walked out, it was chaos. You then had, within a month, you had developers doing budgets and spreadsheets. Yeah. And it's that imposition of dogma that impacts on people's lives that could cause chaos. And if what we're about in the Agile community is increasing the social value of organizations, yeah, it's a bit like me. I want to lose weight, so I go to the doctor, and the first thing he does is chop my leg off, and he goes, "There, you've lost weight."
Yeah, good solution that.
Yeah.
Daniel, do you want to come in here?
And you're muted.
Yeah.
I actually think that in general, there's been a real non-interest in discussing ethics whatsoever. When we brought this up in 2009, 2010, 2011, I put a thing in the chat about an article that appeared in InfoQ about some issues I was raising back then in some chat rooms and stuff and around the web. I went to one particular prominent voice in the Agile community and who had an interest in coaching. And I asked this person to say something, they characterized the whole thing as a crusade to my face. That's what they called it, a crusade. Well, that's a crusade. That's your crusade. Okay. Now that was in 2010 or so. Now it's 2011. We have a pandemic of force and mandate around the world. It's totally normal to push Agile across entire organizations without any regard at all for the consent of those affected or including them whatsoever and any discussion about it. And we're all responsible for that. But the leaders are primarily responsible. So name a leader in the Agile community and ask yourself what they have to say about this. And then when you find out what they have to say about it, ask yourself why they choose to communicate in that way about that topic. Because you're not going to find leaders in the Agile community with much of anything to say. In fact, in the ethics code, this item about, it's not direct, it's quite indirect about any admonition, a warning, protective warning about, imposing Agile or being complicit in it with executives who really are well-meaning but don't know any better, and they need our guidance, and we're not giving it to them. There's no real warning at all, no protective warning of any kind in the industry today. In the code as written, the only item that would address the imposing and coercing and forcing, mandating, is item 14. So my question is, once again, what is the number one issue? What's the number one ethical concern in the Agile community and industry today? We've defined what ethics are. The ethics are well understood to be kissing cousin to morality, which is about right and wrong. What is right and wrong in terms of a code of conduct in this industry? That's something that nobody wants to talk about. So what's the number one issue? That, I'm not saying that it's my pet issue, the one that I think it is. I'm just
Yeah.
asking you as a thought experiment to think about it. What is that number one issue in your mind?
Yeah. No, it's,
I'm wondering about the audience. Because you're talking about a code of ethics for people who are primarily consultants or independent consultants or from consultant agencies, or does this cover people who actually work for the company as a full-time employee in the role of a coach, but not necessarily trying to run or be part of a separate coaching business?
So I can talk to the motivation that we had when we pulled the draft code of ethics together. And I want to be very clear that what we have at the moment is a draft that we have released to the community for feedback. And today is part of getting that feedback. There are 32 of us, we brought our ideas. We're not the whole community. But we do have some clear points that we want this to be applicable to anyone who is doing agile coaching, and we put a boundary around ourselves with this current initiative, which is under the banner of the Agile Alliance. The Alliance is the body that we chose to put it under deliberately because it is independent of any of the commercial interests. The Agile Alliance is a volunteer, not-for-profit organization.
Wait, Shane, doesn't the Agile Alliance take a lot of money from very large service organizations in terms of sponsorship money?
Yeah, when and the vast majority of that money gets spent to run the events but the Alliance gets money, yes, and they then use it to fund things.
Yeah, and it's
a not-for-profit.
But there's a huge conference that's costs a lot of money, and you have to have money backed up in the bank to run that conference. Isn't
run the conference?
Like $2 million in the bank at any given time?
That was, I don't know exactly what the number is, but one of the things that I do know the Alliance wanted to make sure was that they were sustainable, so that an event like what happened last year, where they had committed to running a 2,500 person conference and couldn't run it, and they were still up for a lot of the costs. So that I know is one of the reasons why they have had.
I totally feel your pain about that. I've run in many conferences myself, and there's tremendous financial risk in these things. And you have to have at least one conference worth of money backed up. So I totally understand. The point I'm making is that money comes from, a lot of it, the majority of it comes from sponsors, doesn't it?
I couldn't give you the financial breakdown, but my understanding is the registration fees at that conference cover more than the sponsorship.
For the whole year?
Yeah, because the alliances, and this is one of the things that I can say from my time on the board of the Alliance, was they have been dependent predominantly on that conference to fund the work of the Alliance.
Yeah.
Now, I'm no longer on the board, so I can't talk to anything there, and I certainly do not speak on behalf of the Agile Alliance.
When were you on the board? What year?
I was on the board from 2011 to 2016, and I went on that board because I felt there was a need to make a difference in a couple of specific areas. One, the things that were pressing for me at the time, the first one was globalization. In 2011, when I joined the board, the focus of the Agile Alliance was North America. By the time I left in 2016, 2017, there were global events and there was a focus on more internationalization. So
I totally understand that. Totally.
So that was one of my drivers. The other one at the time was I was deeply involved with the business analysis community, and I saw a rift between business analysis and Agile.
Okay.
And I wanted to bridge that gap. So those were the two drivers for me personally, getting onto the board of the Agile Alliance. And I think I can say for others and people who put themselves forward to volunteer for that board, that we all bring a specific focus or intent at the time. I was fortunate that in my time, the things that I cared about did get traction, and I brought a voice.
Yeah, I totally
At
understand.
the time, I will be honest, I wasn't even thinking about agile coaching. It was
Why not?
not a topic that was in anywhere in my radar. This is something for me that has come up over the last 2 to 3 years. So while, yes, I was looking at the discussions that were happening, I'd read Martin Fowler's stuff, I'd read your work on InfoQ, and you and I had spoken a few times. We met at about 2012, I think,
Yeah.
and aligned on, but for me, it wasn't a point of individual focus. Over the last couple of years, it has become one, which is why myself and a few others put forward the idea of, hey, here is something we can possibly do, which is come up with a code of ethical conduct for agile coaching.
That's fair.
We invited a whole lot of people to contribute, and we've had a lot of contributions from not as diverse a group as I would like, but the invitation went to a very, very diverse group.
Yeah, and
With
there's representation from the Scrum Alliance as well, but they haven't had anything to say about ethical concerns either.
Yeah,
Right?
Shane, sorry, gents, I don't want to interrupt you. This is great, fascinating listening. Definitely want to explore more of the future and some of the work you've been doing, Shane, on this very initiative. Probably in the last part, where we'll get a little bit into, you could talk a little bit more about kind of the stuff you've done, maybe some of the challenges you've had, maybe getting people involved. What can be done about that? How do we get more inclusivity? What sort of challenge have you faced? That type of thing. I think it would be great to explore that. We've touched on a lot of stuff here. It's great. I'm perhaps quite keen to maybe break it up a little bit. We've certainly got time. Maybe open it up to some of our audience. I'm not following the chat. I can't see it at the moment. I'm just going to ask my co-host if there's some interesting questions come up there that perhaps we can put to the panel. Just on some of the things we've covered so far, maybe there's questions coming up around some of the things that our panelists have touched on. Have we got any interesting stuff, Shelby?
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions in here now. I've got one from, I hope I pronounced your name correctly, Zin Chin Zhang. Question, what's the equivalent of the trolley problem if in Agile adoption?
Who's that for?
That's a generic, it was a generic question. It's
right, okay.
open.
I'll open that up to yourselves. And who wants to come in here?
Daniel's put the trolley problem out. He did it in LinkedIn.
The what problem?
The trolley problem.
What's the trolley problem?
You're in San Francisco. There's a big hill. There's a trolley going down the hill, and it's going to crash and kill everyone in the trolley. You can divert it, but you'll kill a guy. Do you divert the trolley, save the people, and kill the guy? Daniel did the trolley problem when he asked the question, you're sitting in a client's office. You've explained Agile. You've explained how it works. You've explained that you're not going to impose it. And the client says, if you want the work, you need to impose it.
Well, no, actually, that post that I put on LinkedIn, which got 34,000 views, astonishingly, was me mulling over whether I would say anything at all with the 20 minutes I had left with the fellow who had the $500,000 or $200,000 of budget authority. Do I say anything to this guy? If I do, I have a 50-50 chance of getting the job. If I just nod and tell him he's on the right track and all, got an 80% chance of getting the job. It's worth probably $200,000 to me over the next 8 months. Which way am I going to play this? That's what the question, that was what the story was, right? I never really did say anything. I was mulling over what to say, because I think that's what we all look at those executives and we say to ourselves, he's a well-meaning, she's a well-meaning person. They just don't know what they're getting into. You know, when I buy a car and I go into the dealer, I've bought the new car maybe once or twice in my life. This fellow or the woman who's going to sell it to me, they've done this deal hundreds of times. There's some real asymmetry there in that conversation. And I think we do have an ethical duty to at least inform, so they have informed consent of what they're getting into. That's my current belief. Thank you for explaining the trolley to me. But I think the question is, who's the person that's going to get run over? Is it you know, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court? Is it the head of the World Bank? You know, what's going to do the most good for the most people? Is it Bill Gates? You know, if it's Bill Gates, then it's an easy choice. I mean, you know, but I'm not going to tell you which one it is, but you get my point.
Yeah. So I guess the point here is you opened up, you tried to open up a debate around an obvious dilemma that people will face, and you wanted people to, you know, voice opinions and consider it, reflect on it, and actually go, wow, what should I be thinking of doing in this situation, and open up that ethical debate, right? I mean, because that's ultimately what we're talking about here. It's an ethical decision to be made.
It is.
And the interesting thing with the trolley question is you do nothing and 20 people die, or you have to do something and that one person died because you killed them. And I think oftentimes we sit there and we don't do anything because it's easy as a human not to do something. Yeah, sorry, Daniel.
No problem. You got it. I'm happy to.
No, it's great. And Daniel, I know you've been sharing a lot of great links in the chat, so I'll make the chat available after, because I'm sure those who've kindly joined us will access it. Sorry, somebody's speaking.
No,
Somebody want to chip in?
I was just talking
Padmini, hi.
You know, to the point that Daniel mentioned, right? So in that context then, Daniel, I know there probably was tremendous conversation on that LinkedIn post, right? With 35,000 views. What was the polarization like? You know, did folks say, hey, you know, you walk into 10 other organizations, same story. So do you want a job or not? At the end of the day, you're here to earn livelihood, right? So Did you find one way or the other being stronger?
Well, you know, it was only 2 paragraphs. I put it in the chat that you could click through and see it. It had no title. It had no call to action. And there were many poignant comments about how people felt about it. It got 25,000 views in 24 hours. And it peaked out at 34,000 at the end. And I was completely shocked by this. All I did was tell a story about something that happened to me more than once, where you have so much time in front of an executive and you've got to choose your words and what words you're going to go with, you know? And I think we all face that. And, you know, not to monopolize the floor here, but I just want to say one thing. Agile had a chance to change the whole world, but we abdicated. We had a shot, past tense, and we let it slip away. We let it slip away for a variety of reasons, but we missed it. And there's something new brewing, and it's got nothing to do with what came before.
We've definitely got time to explore that in towards the tail end of the session. Very keen that we do. Thanks, Daniel. Anything else, Shelby, came up in the chat?
It's a nice question here from Brad. He says, so in terms of what are the biggest problems we are addressing, is it agile imposition, or is it more fake dark agile? Because imposing is usually more about the org enterprise deciding and doing, not so much being sold to them by coaching or consultants. And your thoughts?
Yeah, my thinking on it is that the imposing opens the door to the fake agile and the agile in name only, and lots of other you know, kind of travesties. It's a slippery slope. You know, you don't wind up in a bad spot all at once. It happens in small doses. A little here, a little there. Pretty soon, you know, the next thing you know, you're snorting heroin, and then you're mainlining it, right? So it doesn't happen all at once. There's sort of a gateway to these things, and I think imposing does provide a gateway to.
See, I think it's more of the other way around. I think it's, this presumed, obvious lack of understanding on those enterprises decision makers as to
Right.
what the heck agile and transformation really is. And they may have assumptions that, we're going to do this like we used to do common process back in the days of CMM and CMMI, and I can work with that. But I'm coming from the perspective of someone who works in the organization, isn't trying to sell services or whatever. Whereas, setting the expectations as to, if you're trying to do this agile transformation and really thinking you're going to call it agile, let's get realistic about, what that actually means.
In the role of employee engagement, if employee engagement is essential, I don't think telling them that we're doing this and they have nothing to say about it is very engaging. And here's Jeffrey Moore speaking on engagement. Transformations can't be accomplished without others helping voluntarily, and others don't help unless you engage them first.
I agree with that, but I think at an enterprise level, if you're trying to do something like that, there's this idea of, look, if they're really taking it seriously about, we're trying to change culture and behavior, then when it comes to those cultural values and stuff, yeah, there is a bit of a, this is what we're doing and people need to be on board with this. It doesn't necessarily have to mean imposing practices, even though that might be implied in the first place, or imposing a framework. It often leads to that. But
Yes,
it's kind of that, get on the bus or get the right people on the bus. And yeah, there's this very thin line between whether or not, do I assume it means imposing practices? And is that, the chicken and the egg, or is it the other way around?
well, I think there's a lot of, I think most of the people involved are entirely well-meaning and just misinformed. The executives, sometimes the coaches, around 2010, I ended up having a heart-to-heart with a sponsor in an organization where I was working for him. And we were facing some resistance. And he says, this values thing, he says, people value different things. Not everyone values the same things.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
now we're facing this resistance. We had quite a conversation about that.
Yeah. No, that's great. Thanks for that. I don't
I like
yeah.
Maru's comment that just came in. I think that's relevant.
Okay, what's Mario's
Can
comment
I
in
add
the chat?
just one more thing, Seth? I know you're trying to move forward, but what Brad
That's
brought
okay.
up is so relevant in terms of the consultant coaches, or any consultants for that matter, who are not employees of the organization, coming in for a purpose, right? To coach, to transform, or to sustain transformation, but selling their own services, right? As we are talking about ethics, I think it's very important to kind of highlight that. And I'm not sure if it's included in the code of ethics. And then Shane, you can keep me honest here, because
we're gonna get to that for sure.
Right. So I think that we need to shine light on that, because that's probably the most prevalent activity that we all see openly, blatantly.
Yep. And we called that one out under the heading of conflict of interest. I will be transparent about any potential conflicts of interest with all who might be affected, and I won't act with dishonor. I will withdraw from the relationship if a conflict cannot be adequately managed.
And that's probably the most broken thing around.
In game theory, that would be leaving the equilibrium position and going purposefully into weakness position by leaving the field open for the agile industrial complex, like Martin Fowler called it. And they will sweep it. They do actually already.
Well, there's a beginning and middle and end to everything. I think that we've got some legacy ethical code, we might call it. Part of the past.
Yeah. But in that question that Padmini just raised, if you are like from a coaching agency, you're talking about quitting the relationship or the engagement, as opposed to being an employee where you're essentially talking about quitting the whole company or else trying to find something somewhere else in the company. It's a very different consequences.
Yeah.
I do have a couple of questions actually here from Maori himself. He's been putting lots of quotes in and lots of good
That's
questions.
great. Let's have a few. Just breaks up the session,
so
gives our panelists
without-
a chance to catch their breath as well.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
without
if I-
putting words into Maori's mouth, and or he can quote himself, but he's quite earlier on we were talking around about harm and other things in the ethics charter. One of his questions is it okay? The ethics charter does not have to be set in stone. No ? And then his next kind of comment and sentence to that, which I think is really relevant, is so to add to that, one, imposing agile, fake agile, who can ethically call themselves an agile coach, given,
Yep.
and I suppose that's open to all of us to interpret how we do that ethically.
Okay, that's great. So I'd like to take the first one because I was looking to find a way to bring Shane in because I've not heard from Shane in a while, but I think the first one's a good one for Shane to comment on at this stage.
To repeat that.
Yeah, no problem at all. He asked and said, is it okay if the ethics charter does not have to be set in stone?
Absolutely. Certainly, what we got at the moment is it's a first draft. It's a draft that we have released for feedback. We anticipate it's going to change. We think it's a reasonable starting point for feedback, conversation, discussion. Can we? What does the community want us to do with this thing? We've got some ideas, but I hope it's going to evolve, because the distilled knowledge of 32 people is not the distilled knowledge of 32,000. We're putting this out as an offering. This is something, it's a step that we think is possibly bringing us to a direction that will be more ethical than where we're coming from. There's a quote that I'm to my embarrassment, I can never remember who said it, but it's posted on a building in Atlanta that Martin Luther King had an office in, and it says, you are personally responsible for becoming more ethical than the society you grew up in. And I see this as our offering to moving us in that direction.
I was saying that with regard to the comments on diversity. I said, it's okay. I mean, it's okay. It doesn't have to be perfect in the first shot. That's why I said it can evolve. I mean, people are doing the best, and the community is the community if they want to contribute. You know, we say in Morocco, you get the leaders you deserve.
Is that true in the Agile space too?
So it's a first iteration. We can iterate. It's what we do. We iterate.
Yeah.
And in fact, just to
That
add
goes
to
back to Weinberg, that quote.
Sorry, I'm gonna just bring a bit. So Padmini, sorry, you wanted to add something?
no,
there?
I was just going to add to what Shane said, right? In fact, we should not have the code of ethics set in stone ever, because none of what we knew in the past prepared us for the present, right? We're all seeing it. So you never know what emerges and what you need to add. So I think it should be explicitly put out there that this is a living, breathing space, right? And we will keep adding.
Yeah. No, I'm definitely getting to that, Daniel. I just saw your comment pop up in the chat. I think that'll be the final third of our discussion here to explore that a little bit. 100%, absolutely.
Pardon me, is this a 90-minute thing or 1 hour?
Yeah. I've got another 30 minutes here.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah, we've got so much to cover. There's so much amazing content coming out here. This is going to be one I'm going to have to rewatch because I'm trying to scribble notes, but there's a lot of good stuff getting said. So Shelby, just quickly on the second bit of Manu's question, there was some sort of comment about fake agile.
Yes. So
did we speak to that?
We didn't. So he added a question that said, adding to 1, imposing agile, 2, fake agile, 3, who can ethically call him or themselves an agile coach? ?
Okay. I'm gonna direct that one to my good friend Scott to get his thoughts. Who could call themselves an agile coach, Scott?
Well, interestingly, as I've got huge imposter syndrome, right? I spent a long time actually debating about whether or not I could call myself an agile coach, and it's even more complicated than that, because I was doing business coaching and boardroom coaching, and before I then went like full time into the agile community. I was a program director, I was saving organizations, lots and lots of money, and then I started off in software, ended up in that business side, ended up running some of the biggest projects in the world. Then when I came back to the agile side, I had huge imposter syndrome that I wasn't agile enough. So actually, I don't know if this is ethical. I dumbed down my CV severely to get a Scrum Master job, and delivered a digital app, just to get me back into remembering the development team. Yep. And even after that, so even after coaching boards, even after doing all the enterprise stuff, even after doing lean since 1987, yeah, I still wasn't sure. Yeah. I still if I even look at myself as an agile coach, I can do the transformation piece, right? And I see many people that can't, and it's only because I've done it and I did it before agile. I can do a lot of the things in that diagram that's in Lisa Atkins' book. Yeah. So I can, I can do the one-to-one coaching. I can do all that stuff. But if we were to use the Shuhari model, yeah, I kind of go around these things and say, well, I'm a shoe in DevOps. Yeah. I'm probably, re in transformation. And I kind of all the time, and again, this is actually covered in Shane's piece. All the time, I spent a lot of time doing personal development to get to where I was. I had a huge discussion with at Lean Agile Glasgow on this with Chris McDermott, right? And I thought nobody should be allowed to be called an agile coach unless two agile coaches put their hands on them and say they're okay. All right. This is like the rabbi system. So, Jesus was always asked in the Bible, who anointed you, right? So what were the names of the people that said that you were okay? And that gets away from certification and gets to an experience, knowledge, ethics, full body thing before you should be a coach. That's my opinion. I think we should have something, a lot more. I was talking to Dave Snowden about his new Kinefin system that he's putting out on open space, but he's going to do some training, and that training is going to be experiential, not you do a bit of work and sit an exam. And I like this idea. I've got a first class honors degree. It took me 4 years. It took me a lot of work. It took me a placement. Okay. Turning up and just getting a certificate for attendance almost for some things, or a certificate from going into the Facebook group that's selling all the agile results answers and getting the answers. Yeah. Okay, so there I am. I think I think nobody should be an agile coach unless two agile coaches will stand by them and say they're good enough to be an agile peer validation is one great. Go on, Shane.
One of the things that we put into the draft code was about introspection and continuing professional development.
Yep.
If you look at some of the more formalized coaching profession, particularly the ICF, the International Coach Federation for professional coaches, they actually have a competency-based certification. And what Scott is talking about there is a competency-based recognition system, whether you call it certification or not. And there are a couple of these actually in the industry at the moment.
Yeah.
But they also have, and this is what I believe we're lacking. Well, one of the things I believe we're lacking as a coaching profession within Agile is the concept of supervision. Now, when we were talking about this in the group, we did have a lot of debate. Could we go so far as to say every Agile coach must put themselves into a supervision state? And we stepped back from that because we said at the moment that would be too far. There would be so many people who simply can't and don't understand that our code of ethics would become irrelevant to them, because they would look at that and say, I can't do it, I'm not going to sign up for this thing. But what we did put in there is, I will engage in introspection, I will engage with a peer group or mentor to explore ethical and other challenges in my coaching work. I will seek to improve my self-awareness and effectiveness through professional development. So would we like to see supervision and registration? Yes. Are we there? Are we able to get there now? No. Sath, you were talking about futures. That's one of the things I would love to see happening in the future.
No, you've
I think today, from nothing, at least saying, find a peer group, find a mentor. Don't try and do this on your own. Hugely important.
Oh, fantastic. And you made me think, I remember when I was doing that. So Scott talked earlier about the business coaching. I did the kind of exec mentoring coaching, and a big part of those types of programs is the concept of supervision. So if you find yourself in an ethical dilemma, you will have a coaching supervisor who you would go to and discuss that, and you're encouraged to do that, and you should do that. And if you perhaps acted incorrectly, whatever that might look like, I think questions would be asked as to whether you seeked any validation of your ideas. Did you consult a supervisor? And I think that's something that somehow needs to be in this conversation. But you've led me nicely on to kind of where we're heading, which is our future, as you know. But a lot of good debate about the challenges now. I think it'd be good, Shane, to do perhaps a quick scene setter, because we've got a little under half an hour. Good opportunity to hear from you around the work that you're doing, which I think would be good for all of our attendees to hear. And I'm quite interested in both where that motivation came from for that initiative, how the group came together. You've a few times mentioned the number 32, that there are about 32 of you, and that's not particularly a big number, and you clearly have thoughts on that. It'd be good to hear a little bit more about what's going on there. How do more people get involved? And then let's open it up to the rest of the panel, and after that it'd be good to give our attendees the opportunity to ask a few questions around the initiative. So could you just set the scene for us?
Sure. So it goes back 2 years. And the initial conversations were myself and Craig Smith. We're good friends. We were sitting down in a pub, and we both write for InfoQ as well. We're part of that community. We've been looking at some of the content there. We both know Dan. We'd seen his work. Among other things. So Dan, you were quite inspirational in this thing getting off the ground. I just want to acknowledge that at this point. And we were talking about, okay, what could be done? I had been a board director of the Alliance, so I knew the Alliance initiatives structure. Craig is currently a board director of the Alliance. So for us, it was a logical, okay, this would fit. It's the sort of thing we could propose as an initiative, a member initiative of the Agile Alliance. We didn't want to do it under any of the commercial organizations. You know, I work for IC Agile, but this is not an IC Agile initiative. It's not a Scrum Alliance initiative. It's not any of the commercial bodies. We wanted to put it under something that would make it as globally inclusive as possible in every element of global. So we proposed this we spoke to a few other people in our own networks and said, this is what we're thinking about. Does it resonate? The general feeling was, yeah, we need something. We felt that this is worth doing. We put an initiative proposal up to the board of the Agile Alliance. They accepted it. There's no funding from the Alliance. All they're doing is giving us a space it's really just the web presence and a little bit of branding. Then we went initially to our own networks, and we asked our networks to reach out to others, and we ended up, we started, I think there were about 8 or 10 of us, and it's grown at this stage to I think it's 32 or 33 people who are active volunteers in the group. we felt that for the process of drafting, coming up with the first draft, that would be enough. You know, trying to coordinate hundreds would have been really, really difficult. But we had we've had some wonderful, deep conversations. We started by just saying, is there anything out there we can copy, that we can just say, go and sign up to the ICF Code of Conduct or one of those? And no, we couldn't. One of the biases that we bring from an Agile coach perspective versus, say, the professional coach is we actually do bring a positive bias towards Agile into the work that we're doing. We fundamentally believe that using an Agile approach will probably be better than not doing so in this context. So we have that conscious and deliberate bias, which is distinct from the approach that the ICF or the International Institute of Facilitation or various others might have. So then we looked at what could we be inspired by, and we borrowed lots, and we've got permission and acknowledged them. The ICF in particular were very generous, and they said, yeah, be inspired by what we've written, just acknowledge us, and we explicitly want to do that. And then we came up with, these are the things that we believe could be a useful starting point. And we've got 18 points at the moment, but more important than the code itself is going to be what we hope it's going to evolve into. And we've got a draft of this at the moment. We're calling them the ethics scenarios. For each point in the code, we're writing little stories, things that we have seen where every one of these points has been violated and or actually applied. Now, some of them, it's really simple. You know, what does a conflict of interest look like? Here is an example of conflict of interest. This is good behavior in that context. This is bad behavior. Others, we've called gray areas. These are the things, and that where this group has had a long debate. Is that a good behavior or bad behavior? And we've not been able to come necessarily to a strong conclusion. Those are the ones that we feel are really important to get out there. And we're providing context of, this is the type of things you would consider. So
if I can open it up a little bit.
Sure,
thanks
please.
for that, Shane. So okay, so we've got a draft. The draft is available for people to comment on. You're keen for some feedback. How do more people get involved? And say this was to be formalized, and to the point that we debated earlier that Scott made a couple of comments we talked about, you know, who can decide what an Agile coach is? Say part of this was that coaches signed up to this. How would we get coaches to sign up? What would that look like? I'll open this up to the others, because
sure.
Daniel.
I know how.
What would that look like?
It would have to be 100% opt-in, because you can't make anyone do anything they're unwilling to do. That's the first thing, right?
Yeah.
And here's the second thing: we take social cues from each other and from people we perceive as leaders in our spaces, right? In our social spaces. So norms are socially constructed, right? So here's the thing. I totally appreciate all the good work and all the energy that Shane and the rest of the team is putting into this. How many people, Shane, are in this?
It's 32 or 33 at the moment.
It's a lot, you know, and the good intentions, the care, the attention to detail. So for example, I noticed, we haven't talked about this, but you've kept it to one page. And I noticed that. And all of the scenarios are set aside as subroutines, because you want that thing to be able to be broadly applied. I totally understand that. The attention to detail, the good work, all of that, I totally enjoy and appreciate. I think we're at like 11:59 on a 12-hour clock. It's not too late, but something radical has to happen right away if you know, we're actually going to have a shot at changing Agile so that Agile industry itself can change the world. And here's what I'd like to see. Here's what I think could change the world. The Agile Alliance came out with a clear statement of position on the potential harm that comes from being complicit to a forcing and a mandate. Obviously, it's a nuanced thing. It's not all black and white, and I'm the first to admit that. But if the Agile Alliance, who's a leading institution in this industry, was to come out and say, you know, you really need to think about this if you're going to be doing this work, that would make people read the ethical code and they would tend to adopt it. So that's the answer to the question Sathpal asked. How do we get people signed up? Agile Alliance needs to come out and lay it down. They need to offer at least a clear statement that points to at least the potential for real harm to people and organizations if you're complicit to it without giving the information that executives need to be informed when they give their consent to this imposing stuff. So that's what I think could happen. I think if we did that, that the potential could be world changing.
Yeah. Padmini, you wanna comment on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So Daniel, this might be a question to you, or maybe, you know, it's a brainstorming, right? What if it is not possible with Agile Alliance, right? I'm not saying it's not a possibility, but how else can we engage the community, right? We can't have one organization or one approach as a bottleneck. And as you said, you know, you tried, and probably the community tried various ways. And yes, it was probably a lost battle in some situations. Can we think about another way to engage the community? Right, and it is possible. We have proved it with the festival. We are able to build this.
It isn't. You know, this thing is under the authority of the Agile Alliance now, and that's because Shane and all of us look to the Agile Alliance as an authority figure in this space. Yeah, we do. We do. And to say that we don't is to not acknowledge reality. Okay, so when those in authority who you know at least suggest what's normal are silent on an issue, then we all understand that that's not an issue we need to be concerned about. We can all look the other way. So I don't have an easy answer for you on what to do. I mean, I've gone to the Scrum Alliance as well, and you know, some of the people there and said, hey, you know, you gonna say anything about this? So I don't know what the answer is, and I suspect that we might have missed our calling here. We might have 1 minute on a 12-hour clock to do anything about it at all. So I don't have an easy answer for you there. I mean,
Don't think there is an easy answer.
Say something. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I told
Scott.
you in 2009, I went to some authority figures and they characterized it as a crusade and opted out, and I had to accept that.
Scott, do you want to share a quick thought? Then I'm going to open it up to our audience.
Yeah.
Because we've got about 10 minutes. This has been
Really quick.
very thought-provoking.
Really quick, I've got a question for the audience. So Edgar Schein's helping book. I just went to the shelf and I took out 12 books. Flow by Finn. Tobacco's Collaboration Explained.
Great book.
Pia Maria's Agile People.
Yep.
Kent Beck's Extreme Programming. Jeff Watts, The Coach's Casebook. Mike Burrows, Right to Left. The Professional Product Owner, great book. The Agile Software Development book, The Cooperative Game. Managing for Happiness, Jürgen Appello.
You have some good connections.
Okay.
DevOps Handbook.
I've got most of these.
Agile Coaching Teams. What have they all got in common?
They were written by white Westerners.
That's one thing. What else have they got in common?
They don't say anything about ethics.
There's not a
You
single.
won't find ethics in their index.
I went through the
Exactly.
index of that. There's nothing in there that touches on the topic. Everyone who gets involved in the industry picks up these books, reads these books, looks for stuff. It's not, our leaders don't talk about it. I've got a theory about that. I think the original manifesto signers valued independence and freedom, right, more than collectiveness. So at the time of the manifesto, I was helping BCS Edinburgh, and BCS at the time had, you came in, if you wanted to kind of go, progress, you went through development points and everything else, and you went through the exam system, and you sat and got interviewed to see if you could become, to go up the levels. But that's the kind of thing that the people that went to Snowbird didn't want. They didn't want that. They wanted independence. They wanted complete independence. And I think that independence has ruined the industry. And I think we need to get back to it. We keep using this word community. And when we wrote the purpose of the festival, it was Agile and the Agile community. Yeah, because I think the Agile community is rife with discrimination, blacklisting, tribalism. Yeah. And we don't have role models. So the only models we've got are the books. And if the books are silent on ethics, if the books are silent on the value of us cooperating as Agilists, and all the books are written from almost an individual point of view, yeah, we've got cognitive dissonance. And that's where we're at. We've got cognitive dissonance. Shane's trying to pull that out. But he made the good point. What an Agile community is now and what the manifesto was, it's like an elastic band that's gone like that. Yeah. We need to evolve. And I think Padmini is bringing this as well. We need to almost evolve. And I really think that for the sake of the planet, for the sake of changing things, for the sake of doing big stuff, we don't need principles. We need a vision. Yeah. We need ethics. We need to be better people, and we need to have a framework to get behind. Yeah. It's not all about, proving that my system of doing story points is much better than your system because you're doing a pool system.
Yeah. A small beer. No, that's great. Right. We've got about 10 minutes and it's been a long session. A lot of good stuff. Jeff, I'm gonna open up a little bit now. Jeff, you've been patiently waiting and you had your hand up. I'm gonna give you the opportunity to chip in here because I don't want to give everybody not the chance, but obviously I'm keeping here for the panelists, but everybody else as well. Floor is yours.
Thank you. So Padmini asked a good question a while ago, is that, what's a way that we can actually do this that opens up? And the suggestion I want to make is that we actually use Agile practices, really, really use some Agile practices. Now, Shane, you and I have never met, all right? But I know you from reputation, and I know a lot of people that I love that love you, all right? But
I'm humbled.
Here's the deal. The story you told on how this came about, I'm going to tell it a different way. When I look at it, I saw 3 white guys, one of them who's an executive position in IC Agile, the other one who's a board member in the Agile Alliance, form a group and go to their networks and basically get a group of people that I think sounded like you were all pretty comfortable together, right? And come out with a draft of this. And I'm going to go a step further because I actually looked at the 32 and I could only find, I could be wrong, but as far as the data I gathered, there was only one person who didn't come from a non-white origin from a first world country. All right. I actually looked.
It's more than one, but not as many as we would like.
All right. I tried to look at LinkedIn profiles, and that's the data. It's just to get. But the point is that look, we're celebrating 20 years here. All right, there could be hundreds of thousands of people practicing Agile. What I would love to see is an Agile group who go up there and get views from people they're very uncomfortable with, because it's uncomfortable situations that bring up the ethical concerns. Right? Yeah. Let's create sorry, I'm going to put my Scrum hat on here because I'm a Scrum guy. But boy, let's go hold a user story workshop of people who have been in really uncomfortable ethical situations. Okay, we got to get out of the comfortable bubble of coaches and consultants coming up with this stuff. And it's great that the Agile Alliance is doing it because they're the only one I think that has actually intentionally taken more of a global view of this. The fact that we're all in, you just look at who's having this conversation here is a product of that. Let's use that, right? Use that process, use Agile practices, and make ourselves be really uncomfortable for a while. Don't come up with a document right away, right? Let the conversations and a backlog emerge from that. Sorry, that was a big speech.
No, it was great. It was great. I think I don't need to do a close now because I think you just did the close right there.
I have a quick question for Shane. Shane, you brought it to the Agile Alliance and you brought in people from Scrum Alliance and other places, right? That was so this document and its effort would have some authority in the world. Isn't that the reason?
Yeah, and to invite them in.
Yeah, but you picked people who had representation on who were.
No, it was they picked themselves. But we. Yeah, we opened the invite, and there was a. Could it have been a wider call? Yes, absolutely.
Well, I'm not going down the path of diversity and stuff. What I'm really getting at is the authority thing. Didn't you and I have a conversation where you said
we deliberately wanted to have as many of the bodies on the group as possible, so that there is a pathway into them, so that when there is something that the community wants, they can also pick that up.
Right. So for those bodies to actually do something dramatic here, they're going to have to radically redesign what they value, because over the past 14 years, the behavior has pretty much signaled what's valued, right? So there'd have to be something really radical would have to happen here for those bodies to make their move in this direction, right? Don't you think that's true?
I'm going to declare a conflict of interest because my day job was with IC Agile, and I have a true belief as part of the IC Agile team that we're actually want to do good in the world. Scott was talking about different competency models and so forth. We actually have that. The IC Agile expert in coaching, so I believe that for some of those organizations, no, it's not a big shift. I can't talk for the others.
Yeah, and I see Agile's younger than the Scrum Alliance and Agile Alliance.
That's that's fascinating listening to you. I think so. We've got 4 minutes left. I like to finish on time. It'd be wonderful to extend this out. We've covered a lot of ground, and it was wonderful to hear Jeff's contribution. So thank you, Jeff. That was I think that was very thought provoking. Really appreciate that. It'd be great to have time for some more questions and maybe get some closing thoughts. But in the interest of time, I think what I'm hearing, and I think it's kind of what I thought we would get to, is there's clearly way more to do. Shane, you're talking about quite a small group, quite a small subset of the people who ought to be concerned about this, ought to be interested in this, ought to want to get involved, but they're not. So there needs to be new mechanisms to try to engage those groups and communities who are not. And also, to the points that were made, I think it needs to be a level of kind of holding up that mirror and going, look, we need to get more uncomfortable. We need to challenge ourselves. We need to provoke the debate. Part of why we've agreed to do this, why we wanted to do this, is to provoke the debate. So we've recorded it. It will go on the channel. We will promote it. We will circulate it. But more debate needs to come off the back of this. And I think, to your point as well, you've put it out as a draft version. People can comment. How active is that effort to get comment? What more could be done? How can more people be brought in? Because so we've had some of these discussions outside of this particular group, but I think it's obvious that things are not right. In fact, they're way off right, and there's various scenarios that we've touched on, but we don't have time to touch on all of them. Or even half of them, but they've come up in other sessions. So creating scenarios, that's one aspect, but getting people to kind of want to be involved in this and sign up to this and hold themselves accountable is where we need to try to go. I don't think any of us have the answers. Credit to Padmini and Daniel for all the work they've done. I know how passionate Scott is about this area. He's provided illustrations today as how it's not really getting the treatment it should. So I think that's really probably where we are. And we should continue to build on this and use this as a springboard to take it forward. And that's probably where I would like to close it with a minute to go.
Thank you, Seth.
thank you all for joining us. I think it was a tremendous conversation, very thought-provoking. I'm looking forward to listening back to it. And thank you for all of you who joined, gave up your time, contributed. I couldn't keep up with the chat because I was listening to the panelists and taking notes. So I look forward to going back to the chat. My thanks to Shane, to Daniel, to Padmini, and my good friend Scott, who were all tremendous and brave in sharing their opinions tonight and their views.
Yeah, Paula just came. She wins the prize for being the latest at the meeting.
I let her in. I actually let her into the room. All right, so I'm gonna hang for 10 minutes afterwards. So if anyone wants to talk afterwards,
I'm happy to
That's
hang
great.
as well.
I'm gonna bring this to a close. Thank you. I'll stop the recording. Great session. Thank you for your participation.
Paula just came for the after party.